Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today, our guest is Randy, and he is the founder of NMGI as well as K2. Randy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the companies?
Deangelo, welcome to you and the guests that you have listening in. So NMGI, I started about 42 years ago, December 7th of 1983, K2 a few years behind that. Network Management Group supports CPA firms 24/7 from Boston to Honolulu, and K2 produces roughly 2,000 events a year in the United States and Canada on technology for accountants. So it's the symbiotic businesses, if you will, but unrelated entities.
Awesome. Now, Randy, you've been in the technology game for what I've seen over 40 years and built both companies right from the ground up. For anybody who doesn't know you yet, give us kind of like the short version of who is Randy and what do your companies exactly do and who they
Yes,
service.
happy to do that. And I really got into technology at about the right time. So oddly enough, D'Angelo, I actually wrote AI in Lisp 50 years ago. And I started actually working in CPA firms in the 70s. So that makes me older than some dirt. And I'm okay with that. But it turns out the NMGI business has evolved multiple times over the 40 plus years that it's been around. Originally, it was a network VAR is the way you'd probably think about it. It's computer retail actually, and then VAR. So we supported banks, healthcare entities, accountants and lawyers in small towns in Southwest Kansas. And as the
Mhm.
technology got better, we were able to reach out further across the country and wound up supporting CPA firms dominantly over the last 20 years. Now,
Mm.
CPA firm software is actually difficult to support and obviously specialty, but a lot of people just think about tax, but there's tax and audit and client accounting service and lots of other things. Now, the
Mhm.
K2 business, we've taught CPAs how to use various products. So a pretty good rule of thumb, D'Angelo, is if you recognize a technology vendor's name, I've
Mhm.
probably done paid consulting work for them, not
Mm.
Salesforce, not Google, not Facebook, but pretty much everybody else. So all the hardware companies, Apple, IBM, Lenovo, Dell, HP, and so forth, but also vendors like Microsoft, because I helped with the creation of Windows and helped with the creation of Microsoft Office. 40 years was their anniversary last year. And in Excel, I helped design pivot tables in the accounting format, but also a lot of other very popular small business products, QuickBooks, for example, and Zero. And I can continue name dropping, but you get the idea. I've just
Mhm.
gone where I've been invited and helped where I could.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you said it yourself. You've been around for a long time and you started your companies all the way back in the 80s. That's before a lot of business owners, you know what I mean, listening were maybe even born, right? Or just being born. What made you jump into technology services that early? Way before, you know what I mean, the internet ever became mainstream or people even heard of it. And what did the industry even look like back then?
Yeah, it is so different. And I don't mind looking back and I don't mind explaining it, by the way, just for the record too, because the good news is I just happened to be in the right place at the right time on a lot of these things. So as
Mhm.
the internet was evolving, I actually pulled the first internet lines from Nebraska down into Kansas as an example. And I'm from Hutchinson, Kansas. But things early on were very much character based and we didn't have a lot of this graphical environment to run in that we're used to today. And we didn't have a lot of the
Mhm.
communications. But realistically, what I've tried to do every step of the way is just watch to see what was happening next and go learn about that and then teach people about that. So when social networking was first evolving, about that. When internet was first evolving, about that. As
Mhm.
AI began evolving. But remember, AI has been around since 1958. This is not
Mhm.
new technology, but a lot of people think it's pretty new simply because of the Chat GPT release back in November of 22. So it's like, oh, it's brand new. No, 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 no. It's like way old already at that point. But
Mhm.
to teach people the most effective way to use AI was something that we did. And that's been our basic modus operandi all these years. Figure out difficult things and make them easier for people to understand, which helps them adopt it. And the thing that is not obvious about accountants are either in public practice working with all of their clients or they're in industry helping businesses and all those companies. So to me, this is about leverage and outreach because my personal statement is quite simple: to help as many people use technology in the way that interests them the most. Served me very, very well. That's what I've done for decades.
Very well said. At some point, you had to make the decision to kind of go all in on serving CPA firms or
Yep.
accounting practices. What kind of led you to that, and what changed for the business once you kind of niched down?
Yep.
One thing that I believe in is like riches are the niches. So it's much better to be a master at this one specific and small niche than to be a, quote unquote master in the whole umbrella. So kind of break us down to how that came to be.
Yeah, understand your philosophy on that. People in our profession do speak the same way. That's a saying that's around. But why did I do it? I'm going to tell you, it was not my obvious decision. I had a client in California that said, Randy, we want you to take care of everything for us. And I said, no, you're in California too hard. The technology doesn't work right. No. And he said, no, you do not understand. I want you to say yes. And I'm going to make sure that I don't finish this conversation until you say, yes, you're going to support us. And I said, well, why? He said, well, I've got people that try to support us here in California, but they don't know what they're doing. And it is costing my firm time and money. And I figure if you do it correctly, which I'm pretty sure you can, and we were in Kansas, he said, you'll help us a lot and you'll help a lot of other people. It's like, okay, let me think about that. So notice, still resisting Deangelo even at that point. But once we realized just how many accountants around the country were not being handled very well by managed service providers, which is what my NMGI business is, I realized, man, we can make a lot of difference for a lot of these professionals. And that has really been the case. Of course, I'd been teaching the professionals how to use these tools, and so they wanted to be able to use them. But then when they tried to go do it in their own business, it was just too hard to get right. So that was really the evolution. Now, what happened then is we got better and better over time to the point now that we know when we configure a network properly and configure all the software properly, it makes a huge difference in how effective the people can be. And we know that some of our clients, when they've been acquired, our technology configuration winds up being the successor technology. In other words, somebody bigger comes in and buys them, but oops, you're running a whole lot better than we're running. We're going to do what you're doing. So that's been interesting to watch.
Awesome. And, you're based in Hutchinson, Kansas, not exactly, the Silicon Valley, as most, these big companies are starting out from today. How did you scale from a regional IT shop to, serving CPA firms, across the entire country?
Yeah. Well, part of that, Deangelo, probably came from the K2 business because we were known. So we didn't have to do as much marketing to be known, if you would. And yes, I was born in Hutchinson. So I still live in the town I was born in, probably less than a mile as we're talking today from my parents' home and less than a mile from my own home. So, I'm pretty firmly rooted here, but you're right. You have to kind of want to come to Hutchinson, Kansas, although a lot of people just did because the National Community College basketball tournament was just held here. It's been here since 1949, and I've seen lots of famous basketball players come through. One example might be Spud Webb, the NBA dunk champion. I remember when he was playing as both a freshman and sophomores. We're lucky to have the salt mine in the tournament and the Cosmosphere, which is about a block from my home where the original Apollo 13 sits. Now, all that said, how do we scale? Well, we just decided that we were going to stay put and we were going to use all this remote technology. And my team was not afraid to travel. I used to fly into the San Francisco Bay Area about every 6 weeks personally, but also have been in all 50 states on a pretty regular basis. And, the goal was, we can go into a market, do the setup work physically, build the relationships. And to me, business is about relationships. Make sure everything's right, and then turn it on to support it from afar. And the team here that stays behind confirms everything works before the technicians walk away. And when businesses are trying to make strategy decisions, they can reach out, have a discussion. We're thinking about doing this. And I'll just pick on AI because of its popularity right now. Knowing how to use AI safely with client confidential material is a big deal.
Mhm.
And it's also in many countries heavily regulated, Canada and the European Union, to give two
Mhm.
examples. So we have the fortune of knowing the regulations and knowing how to make things work correctly, honoring those regulations, both in the US as well as globally.
Awesome. NMGI is known as the largest managed service provider serving for the CPA profession, right, in
Yes,
North
sir.
America. When did you realize that you had that kind of authority and market position? And what were the key moves that kind of got you there?
Well, first off, an alternative to the way we do business is hosting companies. And
Mhm.
of the 15 or so hosting companies that service CPA firms, I actually helped all of those businesses set themselves up too. And what I realized is, we're kind of slow and steady. If you want to use the old tortoise and hare story, we're kind of a
Mhm.
slow and steady type of group. We just kind of
Mhm.
keep on keeping on. And I knew what the numbers were internally, but I didn't talk about it much externally because I knew every time we added another firm, we rarely lost a client. And that's pretty
Mhm.
important because
Yeah.
the bucket doesn't have many holes in it and it doesn't leak much. All right. And
Mhm.
same way with employees, the team members don't leave us much. And
Mhm.
there's several reasons why we think that's the case. But it was pretty obvious to me within a decade of focusing on the niche that we were
Mhm.
becoming more and more dominant. Why do
Mhm.
I know that? Because one of the hosting companies that was a client showed me how they were working,
Mhm.
talked to me about their number of employees, talked to me about their firms that they were supporting. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is the biggest hosting company in the market, and we're already bigger than they are. So we're just going to keep our heads down and keep quiet and just keep on keeping on.
Yeah. I loved how you said, there's no holes in the bucket. I would take a bucket with no holes in it rather than a bucket with one hole in it that's getting filled pretty fast, right? Because when you keep it on, right, and there's no holes in the bucket, you that compounding effect, when you look back, you're like, "Holy smoke, we're this big." A lot of
Yeah.
IT service businesses. Go ahead, Randy.
No, no, you were actually saying the right thing, but I was just going to reinforce you've actually got it right because it's not leaking. The other thing that happens, D'Angelo, is on the front side on sales closures, our close rates are stunning. And I think that's
Mm,
partially reputation and it's
yeah.
partially that they're very well qualified. People keep telling us you should have a bigger pipeline. No, I want a highly qualified pipeline where I don't have a lot of sales expense related to it, that I actually win almost all the deals. And when people learn about our close ratios and our loss ratios, they're like, you must not understand how they're calculated. Yeah, trust me, I know exactly how they're calculated. No
Mm,
leaky holes in the bucket and very few losses when we're on the sales lines.
I love that. Especially you want the qualified meetings with your exact ICP rather than, a calendar filled with tire kickers or people that you can maybe help. You want this person I know that has the exact pain point that I solve. So closing them, doing a discovery call is going to be just cakework. It's like I'm walking them towards, their solution. They're going to be like, this guy was sent from me, from the Lord. Like, this guy can help me. So I love that.
Yeah, it is fun to be on a call with clients when they're like, you really know this. Yeah, we really know this stuff. And
Yeah.
part of that, frankly, though, is a little bit of, again, luck on the other side. Most
Hmm.
of the publishers to this profession, Walters Kluwer, Thomson Reuters, Intuit, Iris, and I can keep dropping names, are
Hmm.
clients. So when you
Hmm.
know how the products are built, you know where the bodies are buried, where things don't work right. That's
Hmm.
also another real help because you also, without violating non-disclosures, pretty much know where things are going. So
Yeah.
as of the day we're recording this, I actually know Microsoft releases that are coming up in the future,
Hmm.
which are not for public consumption yet. Well,
Hmm.
yeah, it's really helpful to know that because, you sound really smart when you can predict the future by creating it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Having that big leg above the curb. Now, a lot of IT service businesses owners, they hit a ceiling.
Yep.
A lot of the common ones are like $1 million in annual recurring revenue, or 3 million, or 5 million. And you know what I mean? They can't break through. What were kind of your biggest plateaus that you hit, and how were you able to push past them?
Good question on the plateaus because they absolutely occurred. And I don't want to sound arrogant about this because
Mhm.
it's the team here that's really done a lot of the work and made it
Mhm.
possible. And since we have participated in a lot of the managed service groups, we know the statistics. There's 15 metrics that most managed service providers are measured on. We've been number one in 5 of those 15 for 19 quarters.
Mm,
So that tells you something right off the bat. But
mhm,
for example, I also know what we're not. So one of those metrics, for example, is speed to close a ticket. Now,
mm,
speed has nothing to do with it. Getting it right has everything to do with it.
mhm,
Get it done, get it right, and you don't have to go back and reopen. It's the leaky bucket comment one more
mhm,
time. But it was clear when I was early in the business and I was doing some of the sales work, because I had many years where I sold $1 million worth of product and services, but delivered some of it. So the problem was it was feast and famine. If you're
mhm,
selling, you can't provide the service. If you're providing the service, you can't do the sales side. So getting reputable salespeople was a
mhm,
big deal. It was relatively easy for us to attract qualified technical people because I would teach them the things
mhm,
that they didn't know. And they were also largely motivated, self-motivated, self-starters.
mhm,
That helped a lot too. So it's been interesting to watch the technical people who are so good. And so, there was a plateau in that kind of $1 million sales realm ish.
mhm,
There was another one that was in the $3 million realm-ish. There was
mhm,
another in the 7 million realm and so forth. Now, why did that happen? Well, in each case, part of it might have been talent shifting more into sales, more into technical. And
mhm,
what we discovered is we actually needed less sales horsepower than I had early on, which sounds contrarian. But
mhm,
again, like you talked about the ICP, if you're getting the right buyers in the conversation, you
mhm.
don't have to have a lot of churn or, a lot of opportunity to get
Yeah.
that done because they're going to come in. But having excellence on the backside, when you get them, they stay with you. So usually the only time we're losing clients is when there's been merger acquisitions, and it's not
Mhm,
unusual that the client comes back to us because the acquiring company is tired of listening to the complaints of the acquired company who says, "Man,
mhm.
it used to be so much better. Man, it used to be so much better." I can't tell you how many clients we've picked up that way. Yes, we lost a chunk, but the acquiring company, which sometimes was even bigger, wound up all coming in at once.
Awesome. And then what kind of client acquisition channels are you guys currently running or have ran in the past that worked very well with, for you guys and ones that you tried that was not so well?
Yeah. Well, this is not going to be true for a lot of your listeners. Accountants don't live in social media. So the
Mm,
social channels, even though I understand them and have taught them how to use them,
mhm,
that doesn't attract a lot of buyers in this space.
mhm,
Expensive, but has worked well for us is actually attending events. And so you got a
mm,
lot of time and you got a lot of hard dollars and so
mhm,
forth, but you're building the face to face relationship. So events have actually worked pretty well for us. At a point in time, email marketing worked well, but email marketing, people get so many of them nowadays. They tend not to, open as much as they used to. Although
yeah,
I can tell you our open and forward rates are very high compared to many
mhm,
in the industry. So we
mhm,
we know that people are looking at that, but I don't
yeah,
think it actually winds up resulting in opportunities. So this is
mhm,
going to sound so cliche. Most of our business now is coming from referral.
mm,
So we were working with a firm and they talked to their buddy or, associate at the country club or at a CPE event and they say, what are you using? What are you using? "Oh, yeah, what type of problems you have? What type of costs you have?" And almost always we get that the prospect will come to us and say, I talked to X. They said we ought to talk to you. Tell us what you do. And that's so many of the conversations are exactly like that.
awesome. Yeah, you see, quite a few, I would say about maybe I would say almost close to 100%. I would say 95 to 99% of, other managed service providers that are very smaller, are working on word of mouth, and referrals,
Mm,
and
mhm.
whatnot, and attending conferences and stuff like that. What's some tips that you would give to them, that could lead them to more business pipeline for themselves that's
Mhm.
not really seeing maybe those ways work for them as
Yeah.
much as it's working for you?
And I do understand the impact of the question, but
Uh-huh.
here is what I might suggest. If you're going to attend events, or if you're really working the referrals, do a very strong presence when you go to an event. One of the worst things you can do is go to an event and look disinterested. Go
Mhm.
in with something that's unique for you. I don't know what it is for you. Just pick it. And every event that you go to, make sure that you are putting more than a best foot forward in terms of maybe a promotion or something about your booth space or
Mhm.
something that you're doing. And every time it's something new and innovative
Mhm.
and unique, right? Because I'm just thinking about Avalara's sales tax, because when
Mhm.
we were teaching them how to become more visible at events, they wanted something unique. So they wound up picking orange as their company color. They wound
Mhm.
up with a Tahiti looking hut, and they always had margaritas during the breaks. So they had a
Mhm.
margarita machine in their booth always, right?
Oh
Now,
boy,
I'm not saying you should always sell with alcohol, but it turns out it worked, right?
does
Now,
quite well.
here's the other, and here's the other part of it though. On the
Mhm.
referral, remember that you go back and thank your client that gave you the referral,
Mhm.
and you can also ask for that referral business. So if you've got
Mhm.
somebody that you're taking very good care of, not only the business owner, but perhaps some of the people in the business, you can ask,
Mhm.
"Hey, are we taking good care of you? Good. I'm glad to hear that. Do you know somebody else that could use our service?"
Mhm.
And so notice, if you are supporting a very small business, let's just say 10 people, you probably know all 10 of the people anyway on your support calls. All 10 of them can be referral sources, not just the
Mhm.
owner. See, a lot of times you think you can only ask the owner who else you should talk to. But, in your case, D'Angelo, I have no idea how many people you know, but just think about everybody that you know
Mhm.
and how many people you could refer to a service that you think is great.
Mhm.
And by the way, you know the statistics too. If it's awful, you know how much damage you can do with that type of problem. Think about working the referrals far more strong by asking for help.
So yeah, that's some great insight that a lot of MSPs will take away from, because I don't think that they are a working the referral strong enough, or b a lot of them are just walking in, you know what I mean, to these conferences. I always say that you should have something about you that you can talk about, something that other people find interesting. Um, that can grab their attention where it makes them, wanna know a little bit more about you, because you're just there and you're not really having conversations or kinda being a magnet. You're just wasting your time and your company's not growing, you're not moving the needle at all, right?
Yeah, you're not. And the other thing that you can and always should do, remember, it's not about you, it's
Mhm,
about the person who's just walked up. What can you learn
mm,
about them? And by
mhm,
the way, document that very well, because if I know D'Angelo loves baseball, for
mhm,
example, okay, great. Next time we talk, I'm going to ask you about baseball, or if your kids are in soccer and you've told me
mhm,
that. And I remember that. That's stunning, because most people are not used to being listened to enough on personal
yeah,
items.
yeah,
And realistically, your CRM should be strong enough that you can keep those type of notes for
yeah,
referral work. Okay. So
yeah,
that's kind of a big deal. Segueing back just a little bit on the referral side. Yes, I am with you. I think the referrals are not worked near as much as they should be, but
mhm,
it is also additional work that you can do inside a business. So you're
mhm,
talking to a client and you say, "Hey, have I taken care of everything for you today? Good. Is there
mhm,
anything else that's a problem for you?" And what you'll discover is you can do even more of a land and expand inside a client. Maybe you've got additional security services, additional backup services, additional training services, whatever it is you do. Normally, I'm not trying to nickel and dime clients to death. Never want to do that, because I
mhm,
want to come in with, an engagement and have some sort of recurring revenue out of it. But
mhm,
if the client needs more services, I want to have a discussion about, here's the new level of services that you need to really satisfy everything that you need for the business.
yeah. Yeah. No, to add to your point too, make it about them. I 100% agree. People love talking about themselves. You know what I mean? The more questions you ask somebody, they're like, "Oh, you want to learn more about me? You want to learn more about my company? You want to learn more about my family?" I'm happy to share more about, little Timmy's baseball game, right? Or, how my son is going Division 1 or whatever it is. People love talking about themselves. And that's,
Yeah,
what
and
makes a
how
human.
can
So,
how can you think? I mean, to me, that's like what it is about being human and being a good person is,
mhm.
helping others.
Mhm.
And the more you learn, the more you know, the more you can help. So,
Exactly.
and again, it's not about more money to Deangelo.
Mhm.
It's about more benefit to the client because
Yeah.
one of my least favorite sayings, but I use it upon occasion, was when Rockefeller was asked how much money do you need, and his answer was one more dollar than I have.
Mhm.
Okay, that doesn't really satisfy the client side. What do you as a
Mhm.
client need? That's where you really make such a difference.
Yeah. No, I agree. And to kind of like spin back, kind of talking about client acquisition is I don't think that, we have a lot of technical operators in the space. When it comes to MSPs or MSSPs, they don't have a heavy background in sales or marketing or anything like that. They're more technical as they're great at their work. Don't get me wrong, but they don't have that type of background. So when they maybe have a lead that is interested or they finally got a referral, they kind of roll into this technical jargon of we're going to do this, this, and that. But, your client isn't really looking for that. You should be doing a discovery call, speaking their language, showing them ROIs, what exactly you're doing, what exactly the problem that you are solving is. It's more of a business to business talk, not a managed service provider to a managed service provider talk. I think that is something that a lot of MSPs struggle with.
Yeah, they clearly do, and I know I have suffered from that because of my technical background. Too many TLAs, as I used to say, three-letter acronyms, because we use them all the time, and so we
Uh-huh.
don't think about whatever. I mean, I'll just pick
Mhm.
on SSLs and Wi-Fi's. I mean, that's all like second language to us.
Yeah.
But most of the business owners are really interested in their business, their
Mhm.
family.
Yeah,
And therefore, they really just wish this technology problem would get out of their way so they could do what they want.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now, you also co-own K2 Enterprises. I know we haven't really spoke a bunch about that, but
Yeah.
what does, CPE training for accountants look like there, and how does running two businesses, kind of in the same ecosystem work? Do they
Yeah.
feed into each other a lot, or?
They feed into each other more than you might suspect, but it's not
Mhm.
intentional because we very clearly keep the K2 business siloed. Here's the net for your listeners. In the US and Canada, professional education is required every year. In the US, that's referred to as CPE or continued professional education. And
Mhm.
CPAs in most states have to have 40 hours of CPE per year. Well, you can already hear that's a recurring revenue business in my world, right?
Mhm.
Because every year you got to buy 40 more hours. In
Mhm.
Canada, that's referred to as PD or professional development. Not quite as stringent on the number of hours, but still a deal. So what happens here is in most states, we will produce conferences, webinars, all day events on various topics.
Mhm.
And CPAs will register for and buy those services as part of their license renewal. So
Mhm.
it's really mandated. Now, I like working in regulated industries, D'Angelo, because you have to spend as opposed to a nice to or want to spend. If you think about banking as a regulated industry, not
Mhm.
quite as much, but real estate certainly falls in that. Legal is regulated,
Mhm.
accounting is regulated. So you can hear, I kind of like regulated industries because they don't have a lot
Mhm.
of choice about spending money. But
Yeah.
if you're in, I don't know, HVAC, it's not
Yeah.
regulated. The only time you fix it is when the bloody air conditioner isn't working and it's hot or it's cold and you need the heater fixed, right? You don't
Yeah.
just kind of spend money. So that's what our K2 business has done is we saw this opportunity to provide technical education to CPAs in both public practice and in industry. And a rule of thumb is if a business in the US is 5 million or more, they have a CPA on staff. Here at this NMGI business, I have a CPA on staff.
Mhm.
And she takes care of all of the accounting and compliance work that we have to do. So with K2, we have just said we're going to be the best at teaching accountants how to use technology to get leverage.
Mhm.
So that means things like Power Automate and Power BI and Microsoft Office and Adobe and accounting software and. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how we've built all that out.
Awesome. Now you host a weekly podcast, right? Write a monthly column, speak at major conferences. Let me know if I missed anything here. Published a book, multiple books, right? Let me know if I'm missing anything.
Just 6 books. That's what kind of got me into speaking, Deangelo, because I wrote
Yep.
college books, as it turns out.
Yeah.
So not these, kind of flyer books you see nowadays. But
Uh-huh.
you are correct. Yes, I do a
Mhm.
weekly podcast called the Accounting Technology Lab.
Uh-huh.
And you can already guess it's about accounting technology.
Mhm.
And I've been writing a monthly column for 25, 26 years at this point.
Mhm.
So, yes. So, we could call that another marketing venue, if you would. But to me,
Mhm.
it's all about the facts, just like the old
Mhm.
TV series, just the facts, man. That's kind of how
Mhm.
I deal. So,
Mhm.
but yes, I do all of that simultaneously while, continuing to work in the MSP. And
Mhm.
it's back and forth. In fact, even today, my team has been asking about new products being delivered into the accounting firm market. And
Mhm.
likewise, I ask them what people should know about technology when I'm teaching the CPAs. So I actually
Mhm.
had my 4 people on my team look at some material I'd written, says, am I saying this right? Because
Mhm.
to me, it's all about facts. Facts matter. Right now we're in kind of a fact light environment.
Mhm.
Facts matter. And so our attendees in K2 and our customers of NMGI know that when we say it so, you can pretty much take it to the bank. We will have it right before it comes out of our mouth.
When did you start putting yourself out there really as a thought leader? And what did that kind of do for your business? I know that, especially nowadays, content, it seems to be like if you're not putting out content, you're a little bit behind the curve. People want to hear
Yep.
from you and speak from you. And if they see a lot of your content, they're going to most likely want your service. So
Yeah.
what did that kind of do for you in the business?
Yeah, and it did make a big difference, but I didn't know the consequence at the time. It was kind of like your earlier question about how did you get into this? And my CPA said, you're going to do this before I stop talking to you. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So here's kind of the backstory. Casts and webcasts were very difficult to do in the 2005 timeframe. The technology wasn't very good, but we did produce them in
Mm-hmm.
that window. And we tried again in 13 and so forth. So, multiple fits and starts trying to get a podcast really to
Mm-hmm.
work right because the CPAs were not ready to listen yet. So that was another
Mm-hmm.
part of it. But what happened was once I was selected for the top 100 thought leaders in the United States, that was in 2004, it was clear I
Mm-hmm.
got an uptick in the business. And when I was selected to the top 25 thought leader list, which we just met
Mm-hmm.
in Dallas for the top 25 thought leaders a week ago, you're now running with other people who are being thoughtful pretty
Mm-hmm.
much all the time. And because of reputation, you wind up with opportunities that just wouldn't come to you otherwise. It
Mm-hmm.
also keeps you on your toes. So, you have to be kind of thinking all the time, which in my world, I'll say being the dumbest guy in the room because
Mm-hmm.
all I have to do is listen to everybody else and figure out, man, these people are really smart. I'm going to take that idea and
Yeah.
use it tomorrow like I've known it all along. I have an associate
Mm-hmm.
who is now retired from our K2 business, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Spencer. He had a consulting company he called 20 Seconds in the Future. I said, how'd you get that name? He said, I found out all you have to do is be 20 seconds in front of the client and be right. And, he was right. You got to think on your feet fast enough, but also to be right all the time. So that really winds up being self-feeding because people will come up to you and say, did you know about this? And it's like, no, I didn't know about that. And tomorrow it's like you've known about it forever. And again, I'm not stealing intellectual property from anybody. I'm just listening carefully because my philosophy, Deangelo, is I can learn something new from everybody I talk to. All I have to do is
Love
give them a
that.
chance to speak because they know stuff I don't know. And
Love that.
so, and once you get that, what you also begin to realize is when you get information from all sorts of directions and assimilate it, you come up with your own new conclusions, which are probably forward thinking and
Mm-hmm.
visionary, but also you get insights about the market that you would just get in no other fashion. So
Mm-hmm.
when you think about all of the private equity companies trying to buy MSPs right now and rolling them up and laying off
Mm-hmm.
staff and raising prices and lowering
Yeah.
service levels and so forth. I get the playbook. It's just not my playbook.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved how you just said that you could literally learn anything or you can learn from anybody, right? You just got to give them a chance to speak. And I 100% agree. And I believe that. And I think that one thing I would say, I think is ignorance is a bliss. And it's something a lot of people suffer from, especially, a lot of founders. I know everything. I can't take anything from this guy. you might know a lot more than that guy, right? You might be a lot smarter than him, but he might have one good idea that if you just listen to and you refined it with your vision, right, could, take it to new heights. So, I love that. I'm a big believer and, you can learn from the homeless guy on the corner, right? Now, would you take, budgeting advice from him? I don't think so. But you might learn something that, that he carries with him that he learned, right? Something from his experience. He's had a hell of an experience. That's why, he's on the street right there, right? So I love how you said that.
Yeah. And you know what? You're absolutely right. That homeless guy absolutely has something you can learn.
Uh-huh.
And I don't mind telling you, a high school classmate of mine who retired from the Navy is homeless
Mhm.
down in New Orleans.
Mm.
And it's like, don't you have a Navy pension? Shouldn't you be covered and so forth?
Mhm.
But he also has explained why he actually prefers the homeless lifestyle. It's like, really? And
Mhm.
you know what? He actually has reasons why he's doing what he's doing. It's like,
Mhm.
live your life and be happy, friend. But you absolutely can learn from everybody. Having sat in meetings where I know everybody in the room is way sharper than I am. I'm the
Mhm.
dullest knife in the drawer in this case. You just listen and you learn from every one of them. And then, you, again, I don't want you to keep too quiet, but then you contribute and say, did you guys think about? And that's actually the way I usually, it's not my idea. Did all of you think about, and I can't tell you how
Mhm.
many products in the marketplace that evolved from that type of
Mhm.
question.
Mhm.
And again, I didn't try to put them on the spot. It's just like, whatever. Did you think about it? And so that's kind of the way it worked. I was actually just looking around, and I know we're on video, so I can't actually, oddly enough, don't have a writing instrument here, but
Mhm.
I literally was sitting in a meeting, so we're going to have to use this X key as
That's
it.
okay.
Had a pencil in my hand, kind of waving it back and forth when we
Mhm.
were working with IBM on the ThinkPad,
Mhm.
and we were trying to figure out how to build a new mouse, and we couldn't
Mhm.
figure it out. And it was a pencil, so I broke the top off the pencil, stuck the eraser in the keyboard, and said, "Until we come up with a better idea, how about this?" And it was really interesting to watch all the engineers look at it and say, "How'd you come up with that?" I don't know. But if you think about IBM ThinkPads today, they still have that little red track point, or a blue one nowadays, in the middle.
Mhm.
So I can tell you, I have it documented the day I was in Armonk and we did that.
Awesome. Awesome. That's awesome.
I've got
Now,
lots of little stories like that. Like I said, I know where the bodies are buried on lots of products.
Randy, you've been on Accounting Today's top 100 most influential people list for about, I think it was 21 years straight. Correct
Yep.
me if I'm wrong. That's
Yep.
pretty insane consistency. What does it actually take to build and maintain that kind of reputation over 2 decades?
Yeah. Here's my philosophy on it: continuous innovation. I'm
Mm.
really a continuous learner, Deangelo, and that's something that all of your listeners should pick up. I still have a passion to learn something new every day. What can I
Mhm.
learn today? Man, I'm excited about learning something new today. And then sharing it with others. So it's not
Mhm.
like I'm a vacuum taking this all in. I'm much more like I don't know, don't have a very good machine for you, a snow making machine.
Mm.
Give me some water and I'm going to produce some snow for you. So I just spray it everywhere. But
Mhm.
I'm thoughtful about how I do that. Not a very good analogy for your listeners. Sorry about that. But my goal is to share as much as I can with other people, because so many people want to keep their knowledge in because they think they can profit from it. And my
Mhm.
philosophy is, the more I share it, the more it grows, the more I benefit from it. What goes around comes around. So
Mhm.
therefore, I want to share as much as I can because I figure you'll share something back and I'll be all the better for it.
Now, for an IT service business who's great at what they do, great technically, but nobody knows their name, what's your advice on building authority in this space and where would they start?
Yeah. So I guess we'll go to the cheers bar with you for a minute here. Fundamentally, you've got to pick your lane. Your niche comment earlier probably is still in line, but pick your lane about what you're going to be good at, and then go through your existing client base and make sure that you're doing what you're saying you're doing,
Mhm.
optimizing your process, but then start sharing that in this referral network. I think that might be my best piece of advice. Why? Costs you almost nothing. Okay, so hard dollars you're conserving. 2, you're tuning up your game while you're doing this. 3, you're getting your team all on the same page, so you're all walking the same direction. What I'd like you to picture is a
Mm-hmm.
team of horses where all 8 of you are going the same direction as opposed to one going backwards and one going forward and one to each side. So you're getting all your horses pulling the load in the same direction. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
third one. And then I think another thing is you'll learn from each other. One of my favorite things to have happen, Deangelo, is when we're doing a network design to put my 4 best engineers in the room and let them argue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to do it like this because of that. We need to do it like this because of that. And when we walk out of the room, everybody's learned something and we have a new, better way to do it. So that might be part of the formula on this is, again, learning from everybody else and improving.
Mm. Has there ever been a time where a client or a major opportunity came from a piece of content like a podcast or article that you put out, or that you can point to and say, that's power. That's the power of showing up and putting this content out.
Hands down, absolutely. And
Mm.
why has that been happening? Well, let's just pick on something that's fairly recent. CPs, Model Context Protocol, which is the way you interface these AI engines.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go back a year. A year ago, I was writing content about AI agents because nobody was talking about them, and I wanted to show how they could benefit accountants.
Uh-huh.
Wound up with definite business that came out of that. And this year, I started producing content on MCPs. And as soon as I
Uh-huh.
did, it's like, man, it was like Top Gun. The bogeys were coming in from every direction,
Uh-huh.
which was great because that's what I wanted was to generate interest. And now that almost every major accounting platform, Soho, NetSuite, Sage Intacct, how many do you want me to name, has an MCP definition, the opportunity for connecting systems together with AI is great. Hands down. I know of multiple firms that came to us as new clients this year because I started on MCPs. It's like, well,
Uh-huh.
we've heard about it, but nobody could explain it. And you just explained how we can apply it in a CPA firm.
Uh-huh.
It's like, yep, that's my vision. That's where we're
Uh-huh.
going. Yes, I want to go with you.
Awesome. Yeah, content is powerful. Content is powerful. And I know I'm going to use this little segment here to post just so the other MSPs can see how powerful content really is and how it can lead you to landing some pretty big opportunities. Now, I
Mhm.
read a testimonial of yours from one of your clients, a community bank, and that's been with your company for over, I think it was over a decade, around 14. They specifically said that you would never try to sell them something that they don't need. You didn't try to put anything in there that they didn't need. It was, here is what exactly you need, nothing more, nothing less. How do you think about relationship between like trust and revenue to make sure that you're giving your clients exactly what they need, nothing more, nothing less, and you're keeping them happy?
Yeah. A nifty question. Thank you for that. And I know exactly which client you're talking about, but I will go further. Many of our clients have that exact attitude. We just happen to use that as the quote. But in this particular case, I have tried to teach my team, don't ever take advantage of a client for profit, ever. Okay. They will pay you fair value if you present the right solutions.
Hmm.
And that's why under or overselling are both bad. Now, the underselling, by the way, I do caution them that, you do have to say, look, you've got risk if you do not have strong enough security. You have risk in the early days of MFA. If you don't have multi-factor authentication, you've got risk. Don't try to scare them. Just make them aware and they will make their own decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So our rule of thumb has always been try to talk to the client about how to spend money like it's your own money that you're spending.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the rule of thumb. So, and I do use that phrase very frequently. I'm going to make a recommendation that I would spend my money this way. You can make a different decision, but I'm going to tell you how I would spend it if it was my dollars we were spending. And because of that, I usually also will emphasize that I think people are valuable. And what I'm trying to do is leverage hardware and software to make my people more productive. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, reliability is king. It's got to work every time the same way. Reliability, it's a little harder in the Microsoft world today because of things they're doing, but
Mm-hmm.
reliability and then speed. So notice I want it reliable, but I want it as fast as possible because I'm trading hardware and software dollars to get people productive. And then I let the dollars fall where they may. So I usually talk about it Deangelo, as a three-legged stool.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually just say, look, you get to pick, you tell me what you want. I'll let you pick any two and I'll tell you what the other is. If you want it cheap, then tell me which one you want to give up, reliability or speed. Don't care, but it's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as a non-technical user starts to think about it, it's like, yeah. In fact, my founding partner at NMGI here had an old saying. There's a couple that we had lived by, and that was the basic law of business prohibits paying a little and getting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good phrase. And, again, when I think about those types of things, there's another one that he had that I'll credit him as well. And it's part of the reason we've taken the path that we have. He said, look, you can be big or profitable, choose one. Now you
Mm-hmm.
can't have both, but realistically for a lot of MSPs, many of the MSPs pursue size thinking it will make them more profitable. That ain't necessarily so, as they say in our neck of the woods, Deangelo.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you get your processes just right and so forth, yes, you can scale and you can become much larger and become even more profitable, but it gets harder and harder to manage the larger you get, and getting the
Mm-hmm.
culture right is harder the larger you get. But we've
Awesome.
done it too. We grew quite large, and in one iteration of this business, I
Mm-hmm.
had about 250 people and about 100 million in sales. And I said, this is not fun. I don't know everybody's name. I don't know all their kids. I don't know all the clients. That is just not fun. Not my deal. So we sold it. And I was actually happy to make that exit and recast to what we've become today.
Randy, what keeps you going, and what's the vision from here? What are some serious growth goals that you have in mind for this year, or the foreseeable future in these next couple years? Any like certain revenue thresholds you want to hit? What's your growth month after month looking like? Are you looking at onboarding 1, 2, 3, 4 clients a month? What are some of those growth goals looking like?
Yeah. So we've been growing compounded 5 to 7% for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And we know we can accommodate that. I actually wound up hiring 4 new people recently just because I was forecasting the growth rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how long it takes to get people up to speed to our standards.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another piece in play. But, at this point, I'm going to go back to the tortoise analogy we talked about earlier. Slow and steady. We're just kind of slow and steady. We're not looking for big hits.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate people that want that. That's not my deal, because longer term vision is, the business has been around 42 years already. Based on the team that's here and how young they are, they can be around for another 42 years unless something goes radically wrong. And they've got the
Uh-huh.
attitude that they want to take it for.
Awesome. Yeah, building a correct team, as it sounds like you have, is very important, especially in the
They're
space.
I'm very pleased with them. They're wildly good. In fact, many of the current operators, managers of the day-to-day operations are better people managers and better technical people than I was at the same age and time.
And that makes all the difference.
Makes a
Now,
whole lot of
Randy,
difference.
where can people find you if they want to follow your work, follow your podcast, some of your writings, your books, and connect with you or NMGI?
Yeah. Well, as the old song goes, I've been everywhere, man. So I'm on the road enough that sometimes I'm at events all around the country. But the
Mm-hmm.
straightforward way is the websites. And you can tell we were early to the internet. So we have a 4-letter
Mm-hmm.
domain, NMGI, Network Management Group, Inc.com. Hard to say, hard for clients to say. I wish I'd have named it something differently, but that's what it was. And K2 Enterprises, K2E.com. So a 3-letter top level domain. I am writing for CPA Practice Advisor, one of the major publications for the accounting profession. There's 3. That's one of the 3. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can find the Accounting Technology Lab podcast at CPA Practice Advisor. And that's also where, the long history and series of articles is at. And beyond that, I also have some other businesses and whatnot, which we didn't talk about today, but that's the way to get it. And oddly enough, I get a lot of email on any given day. And I usually tell my attendees at K2, if you
Mm-hmm.
email me at randy@k2e.com or randyj@nmgi.com, I will be back with you in 24 hours, and it won't be some clerical responding for me. That will be me. Right.
Mm.
And so, that email actually is usually the best way to get me, because if I'm tied up all day long working, I will handle email before the next day starts. So
Hmm.
you'll always hear back from me in 24 hours. And that maybe, Deangelo, is another one of the tricks. Always do what you say you're going to do and always follow up.
Yeah, that's very important. If you don't do that, you're suffering small little defeats that are getting your mind out of the game. That's how I look at it. And you're just putting
Yeah,
yourself in a position of where you can't win. So those small things matter most.
you'll suffer a death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. Well, Randy, I really enjoyed having you on today and with your wonderful insights. I think for sure a lot of people are going to take for what you said and implement it into, their frameworks in their business. So it was wonderful having you on.
Thanks for having me on, and hopefully your listeners might take away 1 or 2 good things.
Hopefully 3. All right, Randy. Take
Hopefully
care,
3.
guys. See you in the next episode.